Welcome to this SCORE webinar provided through SCORE Mentors Green Bay. So welcome to this SCORE webinar. This is a third in a series on ownership design produced and provided through SCORE Mentors Green Bay. So we are recording this webinar and we'll be mailing the video and audio files in a few weeks. So please follow SCORE Mentors Green Bay on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter to learn when those files become available. So my name is Laure Haak. I am a SCORE mentor and also a small business owner, and I will be your host today for this webinar. So if you can, please enter your name and location in the chat window. And then you can also add comments during the webinar and there if you have any questions for the speakers. So our goals today are to explain how co-ops work very fundamentally, to highlight some examples of small business cooperatives, to introduce you to the SCORE Mentors program, and also to create resources for you to use as a small business owner if you're considering becoming a co-op. And again, follow us at SCORE Mentors Green Bay. So I'm going to take you a bit through the program we have here today and introduce you to our speakers, but also introduce you to the SCORE Mentors program. So as I mentioned, we have a whole series on ownership design. The first one was on an overview of a number of different types of ownership. The second one was on employee ownership, and particularly on employee stock option plans. This one's on cooperatives, and in a couple of weeks, we have one coming on DAO hybrid ownership, all about DAOs, everything you might want to know about how to use DAO principles and DAO technology to set up your own small business. So I would like to thank our sponsors and partners. So this is SCORE Mentors Green Bay, also Mighty Red Barn, as well as the affiliate of the Small Business Administration. And again, follow us at SCORE Mentors Green Bay on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter to get updates, registration links, and also webinar audio and video. So what is SCORE? So SCORE was formed in 1964 as a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Our mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. So we do a number of things in SCORE. We provide free one-on-one video, in-person, or phone mentoring to small business owners who contact us. We also provide live, online, and in-person workshops, generally for free or for a nominal fee, again, for folks in the communities that we work in. And we also have an online library of free articles, blogs, templates, financial templates, business plan outlines, and a bunch more. So please check out www.score.org to learn more about the resources that we have for you. We have several thousand volunteers nationwide, and last year SCORE helped over 45,000 new businesses to get started, and those businesses created over 100,000 new jobs. And we do have clients, we call our SCORE, the folks that we're mentoring our clients, in over 1,500 communities across the United States. We help people achieve their goals and live their dreams. So how can SCORE help you and your business? I think the biggest thing is that you don't have to go it alone. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, contacted SCORE, who've said, it is so wonderful to have somebody to talk to about my idea. They feel alone as a new entrepreneur. They need answers, and having somebody who's done this already as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, is incredibly helpful to get people started. So we at SCORE are here for the life of your business. We provide free advice to you, as well as specific resources. We are located in communities around the United States and can provide you some local specific expertise and knowledge about how to help your business get started. You can avoid these timely and costly mistakes by learning from someone who's, quote, been there and done that, and feel confident knowing you've had an experienced resource. So the factoid here is that small business clients who receive over 3 hours of small business clients who receive more than 3 hours of mentoring do report higher revenues and increased business growth versus those who have not gotten the mentoring. So in addition to clients, so small business, people starting small businesses, we also are seeking SCORE volunteers, people like me who have small business experience, entrepreneurial experience, and are passionate about helping others. So if you're inspired by our mission to foster small business communities across the United States, please consider becoming a SCORE mentor. We have chapters in every single state, and every state usually has more than one chapter. There's many, many different kinds of volunteer opportunities, from mentoring to being a workshop presenter, helping out with the administration of the chapter. Let's succeed together. So consider becoming a SCORE mentor as well. So for the mentoring, please go to www.score.org and click on the button that says join our team. If you're interested in receiving small business advice, please go to www.score.org and click on the Find a Mentor button. If you're looking for a mentor, you can search by location, and you can also search by skill set, somebody who is starting a business similar or has started a business similar to yours, who's able to provide you with that specific advice. All right, with no further ado, I'd like to turn this over now to our speakers. We have 4 wonderful speakers today to talk about cooperatives. We have Greg Brodsky and Shantae Edwards from Start.Coop. Greg Brodsky is the founder and co-director, and Shantae Edwards is the entrepreneur community lead. I'm really looking forward to hearing from them about how you set up and run an accelerator for cooperatives. We also have Meg Buzzi, who is the founder of Present at Work, which is an LLC co-op. It's a hybrid between an LLC business structure and a cooperative agreement on how to run the organization. And we also have Rodney North, who is a cooperative and social enterprise consultant. Thank you, everybody. And I want to turn this over to Greg Brodsky now.
So let's talk about what co-ops are. So co-ops are this funny thing in that everyone has heard of the word co-op, but most people can't define what it is. So you can see the stats here. Strangely, 76% of people would rather buy from a co-op. They know it's an alternative to traditional winner-takes-all economics, but what is it? 89% of people can't tell you what it actually means, right? So it's a weird thing, and I think we just got to acknowledge that. So let's talk about what it is. So as Laure said, it's a business owned and governed by its direct participants. And why is that important? Well, in most of our economy, you have entities where the owners and the investors are all on one side and the people supporting the business are on the other. And as many of us know, sometimes those interests are really different, right? People over here might be making a lot of money. People over here might not be making much at all or might not have much say. And all we're trying to do is bring the Venn diagram together and say, what if the people who support the business actually own the business? Now, where it gets complicated, and Shantae will explain it, is that co-ops can happen on any level of the supply chain. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's owned and governed by its people. It's also a way of working together. And to Laure's question about, is it a way to incorporate? Is it different in an LLC or a corporation? It's not always different. So there's a ton of co-ops that actually are incorporated as LLCs or corporations. Sometimes people do choose to incorporate at the state level as a co-op, but you don't have to. And finally, there's a federal tax benefit that reduces double taxation for people that are operating on a cooperative basis. So that's kind of a neat perk if you want to look at that. So what is a co-op? Shantae, give us some examples.
So if you take a moment, and thank you, Greg, just look at the logos right now, right? Do you recognize any one of them, 2 of them, or maybe 3 of them? The thing about when talking about co-ops, we think about the types of co-ops. And I just want to point out, because we were very excited about this, that if you are calling in from Wisconsin, there are a few on here based in Wisconsin, like the Credit Union, Capital, Edge. Yep. Now you're like, okay, well, Start.Coop, what are you all talking about? Well, this is the thing, we break down the types of co-ops. So the consumer owned, the worker owned, small business owned, farmer producer owned, and then the multi-stakeholder. Follow me there? Great. Now, you see all of this, right? Now, when we move to the next slide, this is what everyone is founded on. because there's a plethora, right? A variety of co-ops that exist and types of co-ops, there is a structure that helps. Because anyone, which we hope any human, can be able to create a co-op, and together they are founded upon these 7 cooperative principles that you see here. And we want to make sure that you know, in looking at these 7 cooperative principles, again, this is where folks are being able to connect and have the structure to make a co-op happen. Correct?
Yeah, and I think the reason these 7 co-op principles are so important is, just going back to all these levels of co-ops for a second, is, what does REI, which is a consumer-owned outdoor company, have to do with Organic Valley, which is a farmer-owned dairy company, right? They are really different. So we always talk about the fact that it's an ownership model. It's not a business model. So even though one might be consumer-owned, one might be farmer-owned, what they all have in common are the 7 co-op principles that Shantae talked about. So we have a lot of great speakers today. I don't want to take up all the time. So just briefly summarize some benefits and challenges of being a co-op. What we like about it is it broadens decision-making of who has a voice. It can distribute earnings proportional to work, not just money. So if there is a profit at the end of the year, it would be distributed according to how much people contributed in time or how much they sold into a co-op, not just the investment they put in. It aligns incentives between owners and members. I think on the negative side, co-ops are harder to fundraise for, right? It's a more mysterious thing. You're not going to get VC funding in a co-op. The financing is going to look really different. It is a smaller ecosystem, and that's part of what we're trying to solve at Start.Coop, and I'm sure also what Rodney can support people on. We have a bunch of resources we'll put in the chat that people can check out. And finally, it's also more confusing to explain, going back to the original stat that most people don't understand what a co-op is. So we always try to teach people, like, rather than saying a co-op, maybe you say we're a worker-owned company, right? Just to make it really simple and obvious for people. So we have a lot of great resources on our website. We have a free lean co-op course and some other nice case studies we'll put in the chat, and we will hand it back to other speakers.
All right, thank you, Greg. I think I'm up next, correct, Laure? Hello, everybody. My name is Meg Buzzi. I am based in Los Angeles, California, and I'm a co-founder of a consulting partnership / co-op called The Present of Work. And we, in the partnership, are based all over the world. And we're a consultancy that helps leaders and teams adapt to uncertainty, adapt to things like hybrid teaming, and to sort of succeed in the uncertain times we're in. So we do a lot around agility and the ability to respond. So we met actually over lockdown. We didn't know each other before lockdown, and we spent a lot of time talking about our best work day. What does our best work day feel like? So even if you just want to take a minute and consider for yourselves, like, what a great work day feels like. And when we all met each other, we were sort of like co-instigating the conversation around what would it feel like to practice this great day at work over and over and over, and could we create ways of working with each other that felt better than the institutions that we've been coming from or the companies that we've been coming from. So what we were really looking for were ways to practice what we call the future of work, which is highly collaborative, high trust, high ethic, and I harken back to something that Laure said in the beginning of the call, which is you don't have to go it alone. And that was very much the spirit that brought the 4 of us who were solopreneurs in the space of coaching and facilitation and organizational design, to really think about how could we collectively provide even larger organizations with support during these sort of unprecedented work times. And so we wanted these deeper relationships. We spent over 2 years really just like grokking it before we even decided that we wanted to start a business with one another. And then that began the long process of the 4 of us researching what felt like it was values aligned with us. One thing that was really important to us as a partnership was that we wanted to eat our own dog food. So if we were going out into the world and doing work, showing how other businesses and teams can work together better and be more values driven, then we were going to have to like incorporate those practices with ourselves as well. And so when we started investigating co-ops in particular, we just found that it allowed us to experiment with the parts of the business we were most excited to disrupt. Like we wanted more democratic ways of making decisions. We wanted to operate sociocratically. We wanted to be able to pool resources in new ways. We wanted to profit share in new ways. And we kind of wanted at first to reject the LLC just by default. It just felt like too capitalist for us. Like, what can we do that's different? And we wanted to sort of honor how much time and effort we'd put into building trust with one another. So that's kind of where we started from. And after probably about 6 months of research, of talking to a variety of advocacy groups and other support organizations, and most importantly, a whole bunch of accountants. We talked to both traditional accountants and accountants in the co-op space. And ultimately, what we decided to do was to start a partnership LLC, because one of our pieces of learning was that if you're just starting out, you can move from LLC to co-op, but it's very difficult to move the other direction, to go from co-op to some more corporate way of being organized. So we wanted flexibility. We wanted to be able to try things out and kind of step in. So we ended up building an LLC that actually operates sort of all of our policies, all of our procedures. The ways that we make decisions are very co-op centric. Even though when we file taxes, we're filing taxes as an LLC. And part of that was due to the practicality of where all of our partners were located in the world. So it wasn't as simple as picking one state to register. So I will leave it there for now and just say, I'm happy to share more about sort of our journey and what brought us to those decisions. But I think it's been a really interesting evolution, and there are more and more people and businesses we talk to who want to do the same thing or explore the same thing. So it feels very, very relevant. I'll turn it over to Rodney.
What Meg was saying about LLCs and whatnot, in some parts of the country, there's not a good enabling environment, not a good legal enabling environment, especially in the South. And so folks will set up an LLC, but it'll run practically and philosophically as a co-op. But you all in Wisconsin, you got good co-op legislation. So thank you, Wisconsin. Yeah, so where I'm coming from, my experience is very much with worker cooperatives, 20 years with Equal Exchange, a national worker co-op now doing $80 million a year in business. It wasn't doing that when I first arrived. We were just 12 people. And so I was there 20 years, and we worked with other co-ops, food co-ops, farmer co-ops, co-op banks. And so I really got familiar with all the different permutations of the co-op world and the concept of co-op solidarity. If you look back at one of Greg's slides, principle 6 for co-ops is cooperation among co-ops. And so this kind of doubles what Laure was saying about you don't have to go it alone, especially if you're in a co-op. One of the benefits of a co-op that wouldn't fit on Greg's side is how with co-ops, you have a built-in system of people who want you to succeed, just because you adopted the cooperative model. There are not LLC fan clubs like there are co-op fan clubs. And so whether it is, technical assistance or just you need to make your first sale, like it was for Equal Exchange, it was food co-ops who they made, they were the first buyers for our product. And we were often the first buyer of a farmer co-op in, Ecuador, Mexico, or someplace. So you have this co-op solidarity you can dive into. It's a warm pool. Enjoy it. So I want to talk about as Laurie said once previously, was about like maybe reasons to start a co-op or not to. Do you want to maximize your personal income, which is a reasonable goal for a lot of folks? Do you want to maintain control of the business in matters large and small? Do you want to maximize the resale value of your firm? These are all things that are often on people's mind. If these are some of the things that are prominent, next, then a co-op is probably not the best model for you. That's not a slight on anybody, but the co-op isn't going to give you those things. So now a lot of people start businesses for all kinds of reasons. It could be you love baking, and so you start a bakery. And so for the entrepreneurs, I have this question, which is, do you prefer sharing something over having something? Do you prefer compromising in harmony, the harmony that can come from compromising and sort of joint struggle? Or like, do you just like, you have a vision and you want to do it your way? Or do you value process over results? So one of the things I saw often regarding process and results was, I mean, again, it kind of gets back to harmony. If you want harmony, you want to do things in a way that's fair, that is perceived as fair and transparent. So a good process can give you that harmony. You may not get what you wanted when the whole start, but you'll still have the people around you. You'll still like each other at the end of the day. And then lastly, do you get excited about building something, albeit slowly, that could outlast you? I think a lot of co-op entrepreneurs, especially looking back, are what I've heard called cathedral builders. Because back in the day, you know, in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance, people building cathedrals, the people who laid the cornerstone, they were never going to see the steeple. They were not going to see that cathedral finished. It could be 200 or more years before it was finished. And that was okay. They knew what they were getting into. And they and their community, whoever was behind that cathedral, that mosque, whatever it is, these magnificent structures, they were building something as a group. It was going to outlast all of them, and they were going to do it together. So if those are things that you're excited by, then yes, maybe a co-op is for you. So with that in mind, I wanted to say a little bit about just some experiences with my co-op clients over time. And I've worked with some, it could be worker co-ops, nonprofits who are starting social enterprises that will probably become co-ops. And then also multi-stakeholder co-ops. So I think for the focus of today's conversation, we're thinking worker cooperatives, but increasingly there are these other options, like a multi-stakeholder cooperative where you have investors as a class, customers could be a class of owner, the workers themselves could be a class. And so together, these different sort of communities are part of the co-op. Laurie had asked a question about like, what could a successful co-op look like? And so these are some of the things that I associate with a successful co-op. Like I said, they last and last and are never sold. Sometimes in the co-op world, we talk about demutualization. So it's no longer mutually owned, rather it is sold. Like sadly, True Value Hardware Store was recently demutualized. Ace Hardware is still owned by, it's a co-op owned by the sort of mom and pop businesses. Something else that successful co-op does. So it's not about like maximizing profit or maximizing wages for workers, but it provides the agreed upon economic function for its members. So like with the farmer, I could say Organic Valley, it's buying that organic milk at a good price and then getting it to market. The function is sort of that collection, production, sales, marketing, distribution function. So for different co-ops, that function will be different. Also, a successful co-op, it's going to be operating both at the governance level, like as owners, but also internally transparently and democratically. Now, so that'll mean open book management. It may not mean everything is known by everybody. The co-ops can turn a dial about how much they want to share, but basically assume transparency and democracy. And then regardless of like whether revenues are going up or down, or they're expanding in size, a successful co-op is trusted and valued not only by its members, but also by the employees. Like Organic Valley has employees, they're not members, the farmers are the members. But it's also trusted and valued by its customers. It's basically an upstanding, reputable, or ethical business. So that's a kind of a nutshell of the things you may associate with a successful co-op. Again, it's not about booming revenues or profits or having a big splashy name, but serving its members. And some of them do it very quietly. Like many people have no idea that Associated Press is a cooperative. It is owned by, your small local newspapers and could be very big media outlets. All of them are members of the AP and using its sort of the news that it gathers and disseminates. Something I wanted to say about, oh, by the way, one of my co-op clients, it came through the SCORE network, thanks to Laure. And it's another example of sort of the flexibility of the cooperative model, where they're looking at, it's a small business and that its members may not only be like the founder and her first employees, but their customers. So it gets back to that multi-stakeholder model that I see coming up more and more. That probably needs to be a webinar all to its own. But don't be surprised if as an entrepreneur, you see it, you're looking at it, you're looking at LLCs and public benefit corporations, worker co-ops. When you're looking at like, what are we trying to achieve and what are the different models, the multi-stakeholder model is another one out there. I'm going to stop it there. I know one of the things we may all talk about would be things like pricing of equity shares, how different co-ops handle pricing or membership, how you handle sweat equity for founders, but we can all talk about that together.
All right, thank you, everybody. What I would love to do is kind of turn to Meg as a person who's, has the personal experience in your own business. I know, Rodney, you have as well. Kind of like, what were kind of the initial challenges that you had in trying to set up a co-op? I think, in my remembering, one of them was exactly what Rodney mentioned, was like, how do you set up member classes and how do you articulate founder versus member and all of that? So if you could talk a bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. Well, there's like a lot of detail and like a lot of inside baseball. So I'll just start by saying, like, I'm definitely not the expert, but I'll tell you my experience inside it was that there were 4 of us. Again, like I said, we were going to be 4 equal partners in our case, but we still had to determine what we wanted our equity stake to be, if we wanted to count sweat equity, what were the consequences of counting that. So we knew we all wanted to be equal, but we also were literally spread in different countries and different states. And so one of the things that we decided on was a standard amount of capital, first off, that everyone would contribute. And then we agreed that we'd look into sweat equity. So how do we further, how do we decide to further like record and understand each of our like further equity in it and all the sweat we put into it? Ultimately, we kept records for a few periods of months to try and figure out like how many hours were we actually spending on the meta of building this. And one of the things we discovered was that after talking to our accountant was that if we decided to do sweat equity or put a value on it, we would still have to like address that value and sort of like pay tax on that value of sweat equity. So ultimately we decided to forget about it and just stick to our original financial contribution. So we didn't take any outside money. We just used our own money. And what I'll say is that meant we were sort of moving very slowly at first with a very small amount of capital. And so that limited us in the sense of, like, one of the things we knew, if we wanted to be like a full-fledged co-op right off the bat, we'd have to have enough income coming in that we could make a routine payroll. And we just didn't have that at the beginning. We wanted to hold that equity, hold our equity, and make sure that we, weren't spending that right off the bat. And so ultimately, one of the big reasons we decided to be an LLC first was that we didn't have the bandwidth or the capital to create payroll. And since we were gig workers, and not, say, a farmer's co-op that knew when their product was coming in or knew things like that, since we were more consultancy based, and there's sort of, it's not even seasonal, it's sort of ad hoc in a certain way, it would be difficult for us at the beginning to project what we were going to be making. And so we really needed to go gig by gig and figure out, all right, how do we want to distribute? So we waited until we had our first big client to understand, like, all right, let's put this through the system we agreed on, and figure out how do we do distributions in a way that's equitable. So we kind of all agreed to do one experiment together. But we wouldn't have known, I think, even if we had gotten a lot of advice up front, it wasn't until we actually stepped into the nitty-gritty of it that we really realized, oh, like here are some snags that we were limited by the amount of capital we had right at the beginning. I'll stop there and see if people are following it or have a follow-up.
Yeah, I have, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is, it's kind of that initial growing pain because we're not used to thinking about this business structure. And I like the distinction you made earlier about the difference between a business model and an ownership structure, right? There's definitely a difference. And I actually wanted to ask Shantae a question as engagement person at Start.Coop. Is like, how does Start.Coop kind of engage communities, both in knowing that you guys exist, but also engage people in these what can be difficult, perhaps longer conversations about how Start.Coop and you as the engagement person there engage communities to have these conversations? And I guess the question is, are people coming to you after they've already decided to set up a co-op, or are you doing outreach in communities to encourage people to start co-ops? Where do you guys kind of fit in there?
So that's a great question. So currently in my role, we have been working to do engagement focused within our accelerator grad community. So we call them our alumni, our grad community. And so the folks that go through that 16-week accelerator for the past, 3-4 years that we've been doing this work, we've been really focused on how do we bring resources to them. And in doing that work, it's also supporting them from funding, opportunities to grow and scale their own co-ops. And for the outside, as far as the external, the work is coming, right? So within our accelerator, and Greg could probably add some more to this, within our accelerator program, we kind of do the outreach via, let's say, newsletters or word of mouth. And so folks who are in like early middle stages, can be able to engage with us. The best way is to get added to our newsletter and to follow us on all the social medias as of right now. Greg, did you have anything for that?
I mean, that was such a plug. Okay, so I mean, all that's true, but I'm just going to add, going back to the idea of not going it alone, and also going back to Rodney's really excellent slides about what co-ops are about. I think the question as an early stage entrepreneur is, there is all this pressure on you, right? And people get caught up, as we were talking earlier, about cap tables and how much do I own and how much do other people own. And if you are going to have a cooperatively owned company, I think it's about sort of getting your stakeholders together and saying, look, how do we actually want this to work, right? And talking about, do we each get equal say? How would profits get divided? There was a question in the chat about how, how do you allocate value in a co-op? And I think one of the key differences to understand is that the value is not based on how much money you put in. And that's like big difference, right? Like in most corporations, if you put in 30% of the money, you get 30% of the vote, you get 30% of the profits, or 30% if the company sells, right? And what we're saying here is, this is a really different idea, is that every member of the co-op gets one vote. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's deciding everything. You can still have a management structure, but at least around like big company decisions, who's on the board, big things that come up for a member-wide vote, everyone gets an equal vote. And then the second thing we're saying is that is that from a financial rights point of view, the returns are based on how much you contributed to the co-op. So it's less about, where you are in the cap table, frankly. It's more about, did you work more hours this year? Did you create more products for the co-op? Did you buy more from the co-op? So it's a way of saying it's proportional to the work or contribution that you put in. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it, because even if you're starting a company, there are many situations where someone else who might be joining with you, they might not have as much money to put in, right? But maybe there's other ways they can contribute. So it's a different way of valuing work, and especially as it relates to worker co-op. So each year there's what we might call your patronage activity, and what we mean by patronage is how much are you actually contributing to the co-op? How much did you patronize this commonly shared enterprise?
All right, there's a couple questions in chat. I think a couple of them have been answered. One was, can multi-stakeholder co-ops or co-ops in general benefit from grant monies that, for example, a 501c3, a nonprofit member may have access to, and then dedicate or invest it into the co-op. So I think they're asking about nonprofit co-op combines or the opportunities for co-ops to apply for federal grants.
Yeah, it's a couple things. As I mentioned in the chat, so Equal Exchange, I know, and others, other usually farmer co-ops, have been able to win USDA grants, usually for what looks like philanthropic work that Equal Exchange was doing in Latin America. So there's that. But also, like one of my current clients, they're a nonprofit, and they're setting up social enterprise. It'll be a nonprofit, but later it's going to convert to a kind of cooperative to be determined. And so one of the issues is when nonprofit money kind of goes out of the nonprofit world into the for-profit world, and there's issues around that, which I still have to learn more about. So like this nonprofit it is putting a lot of its own money to get this business up and off the ground so it can go hire people. So it can be done, but like for me, and I've been in this for a while, it still looks complicated.
Yeah.
Now they can receive, now we've had individual people, so again, when I was at Equal Exchange, people just give us money. We had investors, but some people were just like, I love what you're doing. Here's $1,000. I don't need a receipt. I don't need a tax write-off, which is good because we couldn't give that to them as a for-profit.
And yeah, and just to add to what Rodney's saying, so a 501c3, a nonprofit organization, is not owned by anyone, right? So a co-op is generally a private organization that is owned by its members. So it's most co-ops are private for-profit organizations. So I know sometimes people think that co-ops are nonprofits, and from a tax point of view, they are different. So it's important to understand that. But to Rodney's point, it can be a little harder for co-ops to get access to grant money, but you can it depends who the grant is from, and you can go through what's called a fiscal sponsor. And a fiscal sponsor basically means a 501c3 that you channel the money through. So there are partner 501c3s that can help route the grant money to you. And then to Rodney's point, you can still take donations. You just can't give someone a tax deductible receipt for it. So
also, I would throw out there that there's so much more financing available now as when I got into this 27 years ago. So there's more financing. There's a greater variety of finance day to day. It's not, publicly traded stocks. It's not VC money. It's not private equity money, but it's there. And so again, other people do webinars just on financing co-ops. That should not be a reason for you not to do it. And some kinds of businesses don't require a lot of capital. There was one in Boston area. It's basically software folks writing code, and their only capital need were their laptops. But then there's others, like one was doing composting and recycling, and they needed big trucks and compactors, and they needed a couple of $1 million. So just because it's a co-op doesn't mean that capital is going to be a problem.
Right. So I want to upload another question, and I know there's EB has a question about 1099s, but before we get to that, it's in my list. One of the things that I've heard, and we talked about in an earlier part of the series, was a person who was trying to figure out what ownership structure to set up. The advice that she got was focus on product market fit. Start as an LLC, do the simplest thing you can. Once you get your product market fit, then figure out what ownership structure you want. And I actually would like, you guys to reflect on that advice, right? Because in my head, I see there's the value in that advice, but I also wonder about the ability of organizations to pivot from LLC structure to something else. So interested in your thoughts.
So two quick thoughts. One is, in some sense, a co-op is never founded by one person. It has to be, like, I think in some states legally it has to be 3 or more, but it's a group effort. So there's that, and with a co-op, if that's what you're going to be, then the others are going to be owners and equal owners, and so you really need to get along with these people. Like, you have to be able to disagree diplomatically, constructively, and like get through that and be happy to move on together. So you may have like a great operations person or sales or marketing person, whatever it is, but if you don't think they would make a good co-owner, that's an issue. I wouldn't want people to start with any business model, LLC or something else, with the eye of like a co-op option, unless you think that these partners also would be excited and suitable for the co-op model.
I was just going to add to that. So we actually just wrote a blog post about this that is sort of about what you're talking about, Laure, about how people can get bogged down in governance, and really it is about, product market fit and about making sure you do have customers in an actual business model. Sometimes people think that just by being a co-op, it's sort of waving a magic wand, and that you don't need to have a way to generate income or revenue. So I'll put it in the chat. So for sure, you don't want to get too bogged down in governance, right? In any entity, you want to like make sure you have customers, make sure you have a way of actually paying the bills, regardless of what form you are. So we're big fans of that, and that's why we teach this sort of lean co-op concept of how do you make sure you have just enough of a governance model while you're also testing out your product market fit and your customer validation. The one thing I'll add though is, it's not a problem to be an LLC. As I said, you can be an LLC, you can be a corporation. The majority, I was actually just talking to a guy in Wisconsin who's sort of the leading co-op tax guy in the country. And he said the majority of co-ops are not incorporated at the state level as co-ops. They are LLCs or corporations, which I was new information to me. So you can absolutely be an LLC and be a co-op. You never have to change to anything different. I'd say the one exception is once you start taking outside investor money, then you've kind of locked in a structure, right? So once you start taking external equity financing, things look really, really different. Until then, you have a lot of options.
Greg, to follow up with you, and then we're getting to the 1099 question, I promise. Don Bowden just asked, is there any good co-op bookkeeping software?
Most people are choosing QuickBooks. I'm sorry, go ahead, guys.
QuickBooks. Oh, I just have one thing to add to that, which is like, honestly, it's about what your accountant wants to use, and it's about finding the accountant fit first, for us at least, because the accountant's going to have a say in what you use. That's just from my experience.
Yeah. Rodney,
I was just going to say about software, but there are definitely co-ops of bookkeepers, many of which, by their nature, are very familiar with co-op finances, and some in New York and New England, I think elsewhere in the country. Key Figures is one I remember, and then Wagner is very big and very professional, of course, and respected. But yeah, you can. I also, if you go to the U.S. Federal Co-op, 3 or 4 listed among their members. So again, co-ops of bookkeepers.
All right, so I'm getting back to Evie's question. So, and Meg, maybe you can comment on this, but I'd actually like Greg and Shantae to talk about this. So there are, I mean, Meg, you came at this as from a gig worker perspective. So 1099s, folks who are doing individual projects, right? That are quote unquote employees of a firm. And so Evie asked, what is the best way to market the co-op participation value to gig workers, right? Plus consumer participants, kind of thinking about perhaps it's the multi-stakeholder model as well. It's like, is there a way to engage with folks that tend to be gig workers into more of a worker type co-op, I think is where that question is going. So Greg, I don't know what, or Meg, go ahead.
Oh, I just had one quick comment, which was that because we were coming in as gig workers, we wanted tax shelter. Like we wanted a little bit, like we wanted to be able to sort of pay for expenses together and things like that. So when we take when we get paid, we're paid through a distribution like a K1. It's a partnership. So we're not giving ourselves 1099s anymore. And that changes our tax rate. But if we were to bring on new members that are not full partners, we'd have to figure out what that looked like. And it would probably look like a 1099 for people that weren't founders or partners.
Got it.
Yeah, so I always have to be careful here because I need to always do the like hashtag I'm not a lawyer, and the lawyers get mad at me for giving advice. But with that disclaimer added, I guess for all of us probably, the way I think about it is that you have your worker hat and you have your owner hat, and there's different hats, and this is not my language, I'm borrowing from others in the field that I'm sure Rodney and Meg know as well. But so if you think about it yourself as a worker, if you're an employee, you're a W-2. If you're a contractor, you're getting a 1099 tax form, right? So that's one set of decisions. You know, in Meg's situation right now, they're 1099s. It might be another worker co-op company that's getting all W-2s. Separate from that, right? At the end of the year, you have this additional role, which I'm also an owner of the company. I get to wear two hats. And so, you know, I go to the board meetings. If there is a distribution of profit at the end of the year, that's when you would get another tax form because you have a different role there.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Rodney, do you want to add anything?
It's often a 1099 dividend form, I believe, but it depends on how you're set up. It could be a different structure.
Yeah, so it's something. So most of my time at Equal Exchange was within marketing, and so there was sort of two. There's the one kind of marketing we're like outwardly focused, where we're trying to show why we're better, more cool, et cetera, than our direct competitors. So compete. This is like marketing to the public, to customers, investors, et cetera. And then there's internal marketing, like trying to get ourselves excited, or trying to get each other, or like new like recruits or job applicants. Like, hey, you want to come work with us? You want to join our co-op for these reasons? So there's two different kinds of marketing. But I think that ultimately, remember in my slides, there was about measures or some indicators of a successful co-op. And I think if you are successful, you know, you're acting fairly, transparently, democratically. There's internal harmony, not discord, and you're paying your bills, whether you're, you know, making a lot of money or a little, but but you feel good about your work, you feel good about your coworkers and your organization. That kind of will speak for itself, and your members will be excited, regardless of how exactly they're paid. If you are living the co-op values and like getting the work done, and you have happy customers, and you're paying your bills, that'll be your internal marketing to your worker members.
Got it. Shantae, I'm wondering, as kind of the community engagement person, if you want to have the last word here, I'm kind of, but how would you sell, right, the concept of a co-op to a person that's thinking about starting a new business? Like, how would you encourage them to consider the co-op as a structure?
What a great invitation. Let's see. What would I say? Honestly, it's going back to what you had posted earlier. You don't want to be alone with this. And when it comes to making a difference in the world, when it comes to changing the world and being better and doing better, it's great that we come together. And so cooperative businesses allow for not only ownership, but community, family, and growth. And I feel like you want to be on that side of the world. So that's the kind of like when I think about kind of the conversations that I plan on having, and when folks are looking for clarity on like why I should. And the other thing I would like to say too is that in my recent experience since February and being in the cooperative spaces, there is this sense of connection that is next level. And being a part of a cooperative business or ownership model, there's so much more. I don't know, I want to get a little mushy here, but a little love there. There's some love there, and just doing like the good and also making some money too. So how does that sound? The mic
That's
drop?
awesome.
All right,
Thank
there we go.
All right, so I'm going to do a quick slide screen share again and close this out. I just want to really thank the speakers most emphatically, because this has been a lot of fun for me. I hope the participants have gotten something out of it as well. As I mentioned, this is the third in the series, and we do have DAO hybrid ownership coming up on October 5th. And one of the things actually that's going to come up on that, one of the participants is a DAO hybrid organization that supports gig workers. So it kind of really perfectly comes out of that question that Evie has. If you'd like to keep following us, please at Score Mentors Green Bay, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. You can get links to the production recording of today's podcast, as well as links to the registration for the next webinar that's coming up. Again, I want to take the last few minutes here to thank our speakers, Greg Brodsky and Shantae J. Edwards from Start.Coop. If you are considering becoming a co-op, please go to Start.Coop and check out the resources. They have lots and lots of wonderful free resources for you as you're considering, as well as a 16-week startup for co-ops accelerator. And you can learn more on their website about what it takes to qualify for that particular program. And thanks to Meg Buzzi for sharing her experiences starting up the present of work. I know it's been a huge amount of work for you guys set up and think through what it means to operate as a co-op and make some decisions about, what is your business structure going to be? So thanks for sharing your story. And I look forward to following your story as you guys develop. And finally, thanks to Rodney North, who has been working in the co-op space for quite a number of years, both as kind of an instigator and supporter of co-ops, and his advice to me and others has just really been invaluable. So thanks everyone, and follow us to learn more about co-ops as well as to get links to today's session. Bye.